So all you need is a ruler. It doesn't have to be a long one, it can be just a normal 6-inch ruler, and you need a pencil. And I'm going to start off by drawing both sides of the ruler. I'm going to hold the ruler still on my page, and I'm going to draw both sides of the ruler so that the lines go along most of my sheet of A4. Okay, then I'm going to move the ruler down. Keep it parallel so there's the same gap between the line and the ruler for the next set of lines. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing below that. And then I'm going to do exactly the same thing again below that. So I've got 3 sets, and you could do a 4th one if you want to. In fact, why don't we do a 4th one? So your sheet of A4 now has 4, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to put 1, I'm going to number them so you can see that we have 4 channels to shade in. I'm then going to close off the ends by using my pencil to draw the end of the grid, like that. And I can do the other end, so that we end up with 4 long rectangles. Okay, then use your pencil and divide each one of those rectangles into sections that are the same width as your ruler. Use the ruler's width to be able to get your sections the right size. It's a little bit complicated, so you need to concentrate. Really switch on your brains. Just watch what I'm doing and then do the same. So that we're going to end up with our little sections, 4 sections divided up into equal bits. And then I'm just going to do this last one in the middle. Now, I'm going to make this end dark, and this end is going to be light. So these squares will end up being the lightest value, and these squares will all be the darkest value. In this top line, all I'm going to do is shade really, really carefully. You'll notice I'm using the side of my pencil. Oh, I should say this is a mechanical pencil where the lead goes inside. You press down the end. But these are exactly the same as any other pencil. It's just that I like using these to draw. I'm using an HB lead. So that's fine to use an HB. You can use a 2B or a B. I wouldn't go any darker than that. But you'll notice I'm just shading with the side of my pencil. Sorry, the camera is wiggling. And I'm going to make this as dark as I can get it with this pencil. I'm not pressing too hard. I'm trying to keep my shading within the squares. And I'm going to make this really, really dark. And keep adding a little bit more pressure. And just keep going over and over it. So that it goes really dark. And without changing my lead to use a 2B or a 3B or a 4B, it goes up all the way to 8B really, and then you could use charcoal to go even darker. But without doing that, this is about as dark as I can get an HB to go. And that's fine for this exercise. Okay, now the next one needs to go a little bit lighter. Remember, we're heading towards light at this end. So I'm going to start off by shading in exactly the same way. Nice, neat shading. It's good practice. Get used to this because you're going to use this a lot in your art. Shading is really important, and we need to be looking at value really closely. So try as best as you can to keep this nice and neat. Keep it in the box. And try and get your shading even. Note how I'm holding the pencil. I'm not holding it as if I'm writing. I'm holding my pencil so that it's underneath my hand, between my thumb and my forefinger. And that way I can get a really good pressure sensitive grip. So I'm not putting too much downward pressure on my pencil. I'm just going to swap over my grip and just add a little bit more because I need to go a bit darker here. So that you can see the square is nearly getting as dark as the one to the left, but it's still quite a bit lighter. And I'm going to do a little bit lighter still in this one. Same technique, pressing lightly. And trying not to make it as dark as here. But it needs to be sort of mid-tone. Now I don't think this is different enough to the one to its left. This needs to go a bit darker, I think. Now I've done this one, I can see how I need to do it. So I'm going to come back to here and I'm going to make this a little bit darker. See, now you can see dark, bit lighter still. And then here, guess what? I'm going to go a little bit lighter. Now I have to press really lightly here. And I can shade the other way. So you haven't got to match any tones. All I want you to do is to just get gradually lighter as you're going to the right hand side. This one is going to stay the white of the paper. This one needs to go between here and here. So it needs to be a very sensitive. All I'm doing is resting the pencil on the surface of the paper. I'm hardly putting any pressure at all. Okay. It's a very, very light pencil pressure. And hopefully you can see that it is actually going slightly darker. I think this one needs to go a bit darker still. Just to make sure there's a difference. I think you'll agree this one should still go darker. So make sure it's darker than this one. And this one probably should go darker still. So now we've got gradually decreasing the tonal value. So dark at this end, light at this end. I think you should be able to do that pretty well. So shading and tonal value can be achieved in different ways. It doesn't have to be totally smooth like this. You can do it in line form. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to draw vertical lines up and down my left hand grid, the left hand box in my grid rather. And you can do this with a ruler if you want to. I'm going to do it freehand. And I'm trying to make this dark again. I'm trying to match this sort of tone. So I don't want to see too much of the white of the paper. So it takes a little bit of lining to do it. A little bit of concentration, a bit of effort, training my hand to make sure it's going evenly up and down the page. If you're doing this with a ruler, you'll find this a little bit easier. And some parts I'm just increasing the pressure to make it a nice even dark tone. And you'll see that as we get lighter, the lines will show more because there'll be more of the white of the paper. This one, I'm going to leave more space between the lines. So you can see the white of the paper, and it's kidding the eye into thinking that the whole section is lighter because your eye is making an average tone, including the white and the grey. So it's sort of evening it out, and you can see that this section is lighter than this section. Kind of trying to use this as a guide. Right, so I need to go a little bit lighter with this one, and you can probably guess that I'm going to use lines again. But this time I'm going to make my lines even further apart. I'm going to try and keep them the same sort of distance apart. But you can see, again, because I'm leaving more white paper visible, it's giving the impression that whole area is lighter. Okay, now next one along. Guess what I'm going to do? You've got it. I'm going to make it that little bit further apart. And here. Now it's getting a bit strange now because the sections are so large between the tones, but you can see that that is gradually getting lighter. Dark at this end, light at this end. Almost the equivalent of this stripe here, which can be your gauge for your other versions. Here, I'm going to use spots. So this section here, I'm going to colour in circles, and there's going to be hardly any room between the circles, so you're not seeing the white paper, and this can take a little bit of time to get right. So I'm not going to fill that in all the way because you know how dark this section has to be. You'll be really bored if you have to watch me fill that in, so I'm going to stop doing that. That's going to be the darkest. Obviously here you can leave a little bit more space between the dots to try and achieve that tone. They haven't got to be a specific pattern. They can be random. But again, you can see that that's getting lighter than this version. That's the darkest. This is getting a little bit lighter. This one lighter still. Again, I'm going to start with a dot in the corner, and then I'm going to leave a little bit more space between the dots. And obviously the lighter we're going, the quicker it is to do the section, because we're not having to fill in quite as much. I want you to fill in your whole boxes, okay? Take the time, take the trouble to do it, because it does look good when you've finished. Okay, here, you've guessed it, even more room between the sections. I'm going to do a sneaky one that's gone half the blob off the square, but that's lighter still, so you can see the spacing is even wider. I hope that makes sense. And then here, just the odd spot every now and again. These really could be any shape. So you can be inventive now, and you could maybe do these as little crosses, or you could do them as little picture of an eye that you repeat in the boxes. Be inventive. Come up with your own way of shading here. I'm not going to show you that. I want you to be inventive. But as long as each of the boxes remain the darkest each time on the left-hand side, and then the value gradually gets lighter as it moves across the page to the lightest tonal value on this side. Give it a go and see how you get on.